Chapter 208 is helping build expectations for this final arc of Tokyo Revengers. This is the kind of chapter that rebuilds the delinquent world and lays the foundations for this final act to be the greatest part of Tokyo Revengers. It would seem to be that this final act may very well consist of 3 arcs, but we will come to that in a bit. The chapter starts with Takemichi continuing his conversation with Chifuyu and clarifying that he has in fact come back 10 years and not 12. After Chifuyu confirms this, we see Takemichi contemplating on this change in the time difference from his other jumps, before Chifuyu says to Takemichi, now that Mikey is your trigger to time travel, going back to the future won't be so easy. Takemichi then realises what Chifuyu means before agreeing and asking what is Mikey up to now. Chifuyu doesn't respond as he looks down solemnly before we see the scene change to Yamagishi. Yamagishi is talking to Takemichi, who has asked him about the current delinquent world. Yamagishi then begins to explain the current state of the Tokyo delinquent world. He begins by explaining how it has been 2 years since Tollman disbanded, and the power relations in Tokyo have changed dramatically. Yamagishi continues, saying it is especially so after the sudden dissolution of the reigning champions Tollman, and that Tokyo's delinquent world was in chaos. We get a nice image of Takemichi taking notes here, and Chifuyu commenting on it saying, man's even taking notes. Yamagishi then goes on to talk about how many gangs claimed that they were the next powerhouse, but were then defeated again and again, and that it all became a messy civil war, and that this conflict was called the Tokyo Sengoku period. Takemichi's reaction to this is shock at the name Sengoku period, and this would make sense considering the history of the Sengoku period in Japan. Yamagishi then states that during those times, 3 charismatic individuals put the chaos to an end. Takemichi questions about the 3 charismatic individuals, to which Yamagishi confirms and then names the 3 individuals. Firstly, based in Minato Ward, he who has the greatest power and influence, representing Tokuhara Tandai, Tarano South. Next, based in Shinjuku Ward, he who governs the strongest gang that works in the shadows, the boss of Brahma, Kawaragi Senju. And finally, based in the Shibuya Ward, the invincible Kanto Manji gang, and their president, Sano Manjiro. It is because of these 3 gangs that Tokyo is now balanced, and the era is now called the Era of 3 Deities. This is the most important revelation of the chapter. We learn now that we are in this 3 states era, and the significance of this is huge. I believe that the groundwork being laid out here means we will be getting 3 arcs as part of this final act. The introduction of 3 leading gangs 10 years in the past, all with different names to the gang that Mikey leads in the future, makes me believe that these 3 gangs combine to form the Boten we see in the future. But I will discuss my thoughts on this more in a theory video that will be coming out soon. Now, back to the chapter. Takemichi is shocked to hear that there are 2 people on the same level as Mikey. Yamagishi begins to explain how Kawaragi Senju is able to keep things elusive, but he doesn't get to continue his thoughts as he notices Takemichi is no longer listening. Takemichi then begins to think about the Kanto Manji gang and questions what is going on here. Takemichi wonders if Mikey was going to make another gang and why disband Tollman in the first place, before he remembers what Mikey was saying in his time capsule video. He remembers how Mikey said to Takemichi, please don't get yourself involved in this, and that he is definitely not pleasant to be around anymore. Takemichi comes to a realization as to why Mikey created a new gang, and this will be the main focus of that theory video that I mentioned before. Chifuyu then calls out to Takemichi, pulling him out of his thoughts before asking if Takemichi is spacing out again. Chifuyu sighs and comments on Takemichi's tunnel vision, to which Takemichi goes to reply but stops. Chifuyu then continues how Takemichi must be thinking a lot about Mikey, but isn't there somebody that Takemichi needs to make up with now? Takemichi then questions this before the scene shifts again to a double-page spread of Takemichi in Dogeza apologising to Hina. Hina is surprised at the outburst before Takemichi bursts into tears as he tells her how he bailed on their wedding and died. Hina is then flustered before she realises and asks if Takemichi came back from the future again. We next see Takemichi and Hina talking on a bridge. Takemichi is telling Hina that it all makes sense to him now. We then see his memories of what happened with Mikey, how Mikey shot him, how he tried to save Mikey from falling, and how Takemichi then leapt through time. And Takemichi says how, in the end, it won't end until he saves him. Now, if we take a moment to consider this, then the most obvious candidate for him would be Mikey. But considering how the time leap has changed now, then perhaps the most obvious candidate is no longer the most fitting. Could him be in reference to somebody else? Could it possibly be Baji, Izana, or possibly even Kisaki? All names to consider, but back to the chapter. Hina says to Takemichi, but let's say if you made a wrong choice and end up on yet another bad ending, even if that happens, I will always cheer you on. And then we see Takemichi's amazed face and Hina laughing to herself. This interaction is beautiful, and Hina is such an amazing character, and is so central and pivotal to the development that Takemichi has shown over the series. But this scene also has me really worried. The words that Hina says appear to be raising a death flag for her, and this time her death would occur in the past. The consequences of this as we currently know them would mean that there would be no way to save Hina, and this would be the only way that she couldn't complete what she says here, that she can no longer cheer him on if Takemichi can't undo her death. The idea of Hina dying is a truly worrying one for me. I cannot begin to explain how sad I would feel at such a death. Takemichi then thanks Hina in his head, before we get an amazing final page of a resolute Takemichi saying, "I will bring down Sano Manjiro," with the final tagline of, "Mikey's whereabouts are revealed, and Takemichi's final battle starts." This has been an amazing chapter that sets up so much promise for this final act of Tokyo Revengers. Tokyo Revengers is setting itself as an era-defining series. Its recent success in the volume sales show this. Tokyo Revengers has outsold everything this year except Demon Slayer and JJK, and Tokyo Revengers will most likely end this year being in the top 3 for sales and could very well be the series that stops One Piece from appearing in the top 3 for the first time in years. If you are a fan of Tokyo Revengers, this is truly the time to get excited about the series, getting the recognition that it deserves. It may also mean that the ending that we recently learnt about is not as close as we feared. As I said before, for me, the introduction of 3 gangs means that we will have 3 arcs as part of this final act. And there we have my review of Tokyo Revengers 208. Please leave your thoughts down in the comment section below, and don't forget to like the video, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell. Peace to all.